Seek recognition. Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
St. Louis and I rise to send our love and condolences to Kansas City, Missouri, in the wake of yesterday's mass shooting. This preventable and despicable epidemic of gun violence, it affects us all. It impacts my district in St. Louis, it impacts your districts, it impacts our entire country, and it does not need to be this way. Missouri has some of the weakest gun laws in the country. Instead of addressing this epidemic, Missouri Republicans continue to eviscerate and obstruct gun safety laws. So to the Missouri Republicans who are pointing their finger at the people of Kansas City, Missouri, and calling them thugs, gotta get better vocabulary. This blood is on your hands. You don't get to scapegoat the victims of this shooting when you are actively blocking gun violence prevention legislation. Your allegiance to the NRA over the needs of the people of our communities. It's absolutely shameful. Missouri needs you to act. Join us in passing meaningful, common sense gun safety legislation so that we can put an end to this crisis and save lives. Thank you, and I yield back.
Next, I'll have my amazing colleague that has led the effort in October of last year in leading the effort on the ceasefire resolution. She has been an incredible advocate, just a real true leader, but somebody that is leading with compassion. This woman calls me every single day to check up on me. And I'll tell her, you know, you make me stand still, and then I start crying. I feel so helpless as a member of Congress. But she makes me make sure that I don't feel alone. So with that, Cori Bush.
Call you because you're my sister, and I got to make sure you're good. If nobody else in this Congress needs to have a call to make sure that you're good, the one and only Palestinian American should receive the call to make sure that you're good. And so I love you, sis. Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here. And again, thank you to my sister in service in this push for a ceasefire, in this strong push for a ceasefire, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Thank you for bringing us all together today to urgently and loudly and forcefully say that we, the United States, have a moral obligation to use our immense power to stop the Israeli government's plans to invade Rafah, where over 1 million Palestinians were told to seek refuge. I also want to thank all of my colleagues who came out today in support of this call, Representatives Lee and Garcia, Schakowsky. I know Omar will be here, Ramirez, Velasquez, Dingle, to Johnson and Carson. You all are such a great reflection of how strong our movement for a ceasefire is. I'm grateful for your advocacy, and it is this movement that gives me hope that we will see a lasting ceasefire in Gaza and a just and lasting peace in Palestine and Israel. The Israeli government's threat to imminently invade Rafah is unconscionable. Rafah is supposed to be a safe zone in Gaza and the last one left. It is where 1.5 million displaced Palestinians are trapped. And though it was referred to as this safe zone, we know that it is not really safe. There aren't enough places to sleep, and families are sleeping in chicken coops or sheltering wherever they can find a place. There is such widespread starvation that people have resorted to mixing, which we just heard from Rashida Tlaib, mixing animal feed with grass and feeding it to their children. Doctors and medical staff don't have enough supplies to treat patients for even some of the most basic illnesses, let alone the horrific injuries caused by the Israeli forces' relentless attacks on civilians, on civilian infrastructure, and even the humanitarian medical aid that is needed to help save lives. So to be clear, since Rafah isn't a safe zone, there is no safe zone in Gaza. And just think about it for a moment. Those of us that have never fed animal feed mixed with grass to our children. Let's think about that. There is nowhere else to go. Everywhere else has been destroyed, turned to rubble with bodies piled underneath. Nowhere is home, because if you leave now, While the U.S.-backed Israeli military is destroying and intent on occupying it, there is no guarantee that you will be able to be allowed back. And if this was your family, what would you do? Where would you go? We need to secure an immediate and lasting ceasefire. An immediate and lasting ceasefire is how we save 1.5 million Palestinians in Rafah. An immediate and lasting ceasefire is how we get the children and other civilians in Gaza the massive humanitarian assistance they desperately need. An immediate ceasefire and lasting ceasefire is how we ensure the safety and release of hostages and those arbitrarily detained. An immediate and lasting ceasefire is how we end the bloodshed, end the complicity, end the inhumanity. An immediate and lasting ceasefire is how we ensure peace and justice for all. And to be clear, only a lasting ceasefire can bring us these outcomes. Only a lasting ceasefire is acceptable, not a temporary pause, not a ceasefire with an end date, not pretending to care about civilians by sending them a sliver of humanitarian aid only to indiscriminately bomb them days later. Only a lasting ceasefire. So this afternoon, Congresswoman Tlaib and I are sending a letter to President Biden underscoring the urgency of this growing catastrophe. We are requesting a meeting with President Biden. We are demanding an immediate, lasting ceasefire and that the Israeli government commit to ceasing any plans to bombard and invade Rafah. As lawmakers leading the push in Congress for a ceasefire, we want to hear directly from President Biden. The majority of voters in this country want a ceasefire, including 77% of Democrats. And the majority of the world wants a ceasefire. People in this country do not want to be complicit in the atrocities that are happening in Gaza. We don't want that. Not on our watch. And we've said it over and over again. Not on our watch and not on our dime. How many Palestinian deaths must our country be complicit in killing before the violence ends? How many Palestinian children must die before we stop bear hugging Netanyahu's extremist far-right government with our taxpayer-sponsored bombs and weapons? How many Palestinian families must be destroyed before we stop enabling these war crimes? How many more before Biden will act with the full leverage of the U.S. government to facilitate a lasting ceasefire to end the violence and save lives? If the Israeli military invades Rafah, tens of thousands more Palestinians, more than over the 30,000, will die. President Biden, we are urging you to use your power to lead us to a lasting ceasefire, to do everything in your power to put an end to the violence. The loss we have already seen is too much. Ceasefire now.
From Missouri is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, Mr. Hur. St. Louis and I are here today once again to focus on the real issues that affect our communities instead of partisan hit jobs. Let me start by saying that the potential mishandling of classified information is a serious issue, and I believe it was appropriate for the Attorney General to appoint both special counsels in the Biden and Trump cases. As my colleagues have pointed out, President Biden fully complied with the investigation conducted by Special Counsel Hur, who did not find evidence sufficient to warrant criminal charges. Despite this outcome, Republicans have used the special counsel's report to further their longstanding efforts to re-elect the former white supremacist in chief, Donald Trump, who faces 40 criminal charges related to the mishandling of classified documents, including obstruction of justice. While President Biden returned all of the classified material and complied with the special counsel's investigation, let's remind ourselves what Donald Trump has said and done. He refused to turn over the classified documents in his possession to the National Archives. He is on tape sharing documents he said he could have declassified when he was president. He wrongly claimed in an interview that the Presidential Records Act allows him to do whatever he wants, and he was allowed to do everything he did. He also said on his right-wing social media platform, quote, "I'm allowed to do all of this." He continues to admit to his possession of these documents on the campaign trail. So this hearing is not a good faith oversight effort. It is just the latest in a long line of dysfunctional and destructive actions taken by this Republican majority. They don't care about responsible governance or making people's lives better. They don't have an affirmative agenda. They are throwing whatever they can at the wall and hoping it sticks, and they have zero credibility to talk about mental acuity when they support Donald Trump. The same Donald Trump who mixes up Joe Biden and Barack Obama and Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi. The same Donald Trump who incorrectly pronounced the words Venezuela, respected, and United States. The same Donald Trump who calls January 6 defendants hostages. And the same Donald Trump who believed bleach injections would treat COVID-19. It is deeply hypocritical for anyone who champions this man for the presidency to talk about the mental acuity of anyone else. But this is nothing new. This has been a consistent pattern of the Republican majority in this Congress. From the sham impeachment investigation that has completely collapsed to the absurd impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas, Republicans have solely focused on destroying the incumbent president, destroying the Democratic Party, destroying progressive movements for social justice, all so that they can re-elect one of the worst presidents of all time. Now, it is well known that I have disagreements with President Biden on certain issues. My concerns are rooted in the desire to resolve policy matters and help him take better positions that save more lives. That's not what Republicans are doing. That's not what these investigations and attacks are about. They are trying everything they can to turn back the clock on our rights and our freedoms, and we cannot take the bait. Let's focus on policy. Let's focus on substance. Let's focus on saving and improving the lives of our constituents, not misusing the precious time and resources of this committee, not being dishonest just because it serves our political interests. We are better than that, and our country deserves better than all of this. I will continue to reject these absurd distractions from the investments we need in the communities that we represent. Let's focus on that instead of this irresponsible and easily repudiated Republican clown show. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. I recognize myself for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. St. Louis and I are here today for this convening on threats to our nation's power grid and to elaborate on the real, actual attacks it faces by white nationalists across our country. For years, law enforcement and researchers have been monitoring violent white supremacist groups and their targeting of our country's power grid. Many in these groups call themselves accelerationists. They've put out how-to manuals to make it easier to attack critical infrastructure like the electric grid, and are convinced that the best way to achieve their goal of a white supremacist future is to cause a societal collapse by plunging it into darkness. Mr. Monken, I briefly spoke during my opening remarks, but are domestic terrorist groups a current threat to the United States energy infrastructure?
Yes, they absolutely are.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, those with hate in their hearts do not want to see all communities of people succeed, especially our Black and brown communities. Over the last 2 years, the FBI arrested 3 different groups of white supremacists for attacking or plotting to attack our power grid. Mr. Monken, what steps have the federal government and federal energy regulators taken to address the risk of physical attacks on the electric grid?
Currently, I believe they're insufficient, frankly. So there are some existing standards known as CIP, or Critical Infrastructure Protection, specifically designated CIP 14 for physical security of critical installations or critical substations within the bulk electric system. But right now, it's still insufficient for what we need.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Monken, what can Congress do better to ensure that the national electric grid system is safe from physical attack? What can we do?
Having a clear understanding of what the most effective mitigation strategies really are from a physical security standpoint, I think is hugely important, and then placing a significant priority on how those projects are ultimately introduced, reviewed for their just and reasonable costs, and then ultimately approved to make sure that those facilities are secure enough that we have confidence that they'll deliver that reliable power that the people need.
Okay, thank you. The people of St. Louis currently face high utility bills, extreme weather and air that is unhealthy to breathe. And on top of all of that, white supremacists want to sabotage the power grid and foment chaos and fear in our communities. We must invest in and foster the growth of green energy and the infrastructure needed to deliver power to the people of St. Louis. I look forward to working with FERC to make this happen as quickly as possible. My constituents don't have time to wait. Now, on the issue of our clean energy transition, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's chief scientist, quote, not only was 2023 the warmest year in NOAA's 173 climate record, it was the warmest by far, end quote. And so that's scary. And it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable for our children and for our grandchildren who will inherit this mess if we don't address the horrors of climate change. So, Mr. Monken, very briefly, how does climate change affect the community's need and demand for energy?
Well, in a very significant way, recognizing the fact that not only are these climate-driven events a significant exacerbator of existing challenges that we have for grid reliability, meaning they're more likely to cause the types of outages at both the scale and the duration that are going to have those very human consequences. They also disproportionately affect communities of low economic status, recognizing they disproportionately affect these minority communities that do not have the financial wherewithal or the ability to avert the worst case impacts of those particular disasters. So it's something that we really need to address through a deliberate action towards energy equity, recognizing that the ability to pay is not the prerequisite for the ability to receive the reliable power that you need.
That's a quote. In my opening statement, I spoke of my constituents and marginalized communities who bear the brunt of the high cost of burning fossil fuels for power generation. These costs can be both physical and monetary. Mr. Monken, can you briefly explain how investing in clean power grid enables economic growth?
Absolutely. The aggregated economic impacts of the clean energy transition are dramatic and significant. And when we look at where jobs can be really built and sustained in support of the green energy transition, it's a much more equitable distribution of where those jobs can really be built and then again sustained as we get through the transition itself. So recognizing that this is a necessary driver, we should not be in the back seat for the clean energy transition and let even global adversaries take a pole position on how this transition occurs. We really need to enforce our right to be able to be the first movers in this space and harness the full economic value of it.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Recognize Ms. Bush for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. St. Louis and I are here today once again to focus on the real issues that affect our communities instead of this partisan circus. Let me start by saying that influence peddling is absolutely a very serious issue, full stop. But we all know the truth. Donald Trump is the quintessential influence peddler in chief. Despite this, for well over a year now, House Republicans have spent dozens of hours of precious committee time hearing testimony from nearly 20 witnesses on their baseless and increasingly embarrassing attempts to link President Biden to actions of his family members and implicate him by association. Even after all this time and effort, they haven't been able to muster up any credible links between the president and his son's business dealings. All they have proven is that they will do whatever it takes, including using their razor-thin majority and chairmanships to waste the people's time. Let's let today's hearing be the final nail in the coffin of this sham impeachment investigation. I urge my Republican colleagues to admit that their quest to impeach the president has completely collapsed. They have fallen short, and with each passing deal, they are losing votes and credibility, even within their own conference. It's time for them to move on. But that's not likely to happen because my Republican colleagues don't care about responsible governance or making people's lives better. They don't have an affirmative agenda. They would rather distract us all with these unfounded accusations against the president. So it's no coincidence that under Republican leadership, 2023 marked the most unproductive year in modern history for Congress. Aside from a failed impeachment investigation, an unprecedented 3-week stint without a speaker, and bringing our country to the brink of a catastrophic government shutdown multiple times, Republicans have done absolutely nothing to demonstrate why they deserve to control any chamber of Congress, let alone the White House, for which their cult leader, A twice impeached, 4 times indicted former president is running to gain influence and control again. They're just grasping at straws, and it'd be comical if it wasn't leading to real harm and real hurt in our communities. The people of our country are the ones paying the price for their failure to actually govern. Instead of wasting all of our time, our hours and hours going down fake rabbit holes and amplifying baseless conspiracies, we could focus on actual policy. We could focus on substance. We could focus on saving and improving the lives of our constituents, not misusing precious time and resources of this committee. What I'd rather focus on is the people who don't have the money and resources to buy influence, the millions of people in our districts who have been harmed by the ongoing refusal of the federal government to take full responsibility for the Manhattan Project waste, and who are still getting sick from exposure to toxic radioactive waste their own government created. It still lingers in communities all across the country, like in St. Louis, Missouri, where proper cleanup still remains undone. I am ranking member on the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Energy Policy, and Regulatory Affairs. I have repeatedly requested a hearing on Manhattan Project waste and its countless victims. I'm still waiting. We could focus on ending the crisis of gun violence in this country. Every day, 327 people are shot in the United States. Every year, 42,654 people die from gun violence. More children die from guns than anything else in this country. Why are we not acting to protect them? How are we not treating this like the public health emergency that it is? We could focus on improving the lives of incarcerated individuals and weaning ourselves off of the carceral state. A currently incarcerated individual is your star witness today. I applaud your inclusivity. And surely, if folks convicted of crimes can testify before Congress, they should be allowed to vote. Why not enfranchise them? What about reproductive rights and freedom? We have a public health crisis in this country where millions of people of reproductive age can't get the care that they need. People in St. Louis are being forced to give birth against their will. Republicans need to use abortion care just like the rest of us. Why not meaningfully address this issue? We need to focus on ending the atrocities in Gaza and Israel. Since January, malnutrition in children under 5 has nearly doubled. Global experts warn famine is imminent for 1.1 million people, half the population due to catastrophic food insecurity. Why are we not acting to reinstate UNRWA, prevent famine and the spread of disease, and ending the continued slaughter of Palestinians? We do not have infinite time and resources. I will stop there. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time to Rep. Goldman.
Thank you very much, Ms.
10
Bush.
seconds.
I want to just point to a photo here. Mr. Bobolinsky, you have testified that Cassidy Hutchinson's account that you met Mark Meadows, then Chief of Staff for Donald Trump, at a Trump rally in Georgia behind Secret Service cars. You were wearing
Time's
a mask.
expired.
Sir, you went over a minute late with Mr. Perry. If we could have a little extra time. The Trump rally that you said
Time's
that she
expired.
was lying.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Sessions for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, could we have some basic equity?
If someone else wants to yield, she had 8 seconds to yield him, and he's got up here with a speech. He's already abused his privilege by making a motion that wasn't even a motion. Chair has ruled. The chair has ruled. The chair has ruled.
What are you afraid of, Mr. Chairman?
Recognize your.
What are you afraid of? Why don't you let me ask the question?
Chair recognizes the gentleman from. Oh, what purpose do you seek recognition, Mr. Biggs?
Unanimous consent to introduce the documents into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you,
So
Mr.
ordered.
Chairman. Here they are. One is the invitation that was mentioned. Another is Hunter Biden's calendar. Another is the email mentioned confirming that Yelena Ballerini was going to invest $10 to $20 million with him. Another one is page 180 of the Galenis interview, page 56 of the transcribed interview of Hunter Biden, and also pages 41 and 42 of the Galenis interview.
Without objection, so ordered into the
Chairman,
record. Now, Chair, what purpose do you seek? Ms. Bush from Missouri for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. St. Louis and I are here today, Dr. Califf, to first thank you for the work that the FDA has done to eliminate cumbersome restrictions on mifepristone, one of 2 drugs used for medication abortion. As Ranking Member Raskin mentioned at the top of the hearing, mifepristone is subject to a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, also known as REMS. During the peak of COVID-19, the FDA suspended enforcement of a REMS requirement that mifepristone be dispensed in person. Due to the success of this trial run, we know that in January 2023, the FDA permanently updated the strategy to remove the in-person dispensing requirement. This has proven that the in-person dispensing requirement was never actually medically necessary. I have a bill called the Protecting Access to Medication Abortion Act, which would assure that mifepristone, 1, does not have an in-person dispensing requirement, 2, allows patients to access prescriptions for mifepristone via telehealth, and 3, authorizes all pharmacies certified to dispense mifepristone to patients to do so via mail. So thank you to the FDA for your commitment to your evidence-based care that serves patients and not politicians. Next, I want to turn to sickle cell, a disease that affects approximately 100,000 people across our country, the majority of whom are Black people, and about 2,000 people across my district. In fact, according to the CDC, 1 out of every 365 Black children in the United States are born with sickle cell disease. It cuts at least 20 years from life expectancy. And so as a nurse, I've treated people with sickle cell disease. Patients experience totalizing pain, and it is debilitating. This illness completely takes over your life, and it is heart-wrenching, and we don't speak enough about it. So last year, the FDA issued a groundbreaking approval of the first gene therapy to treat sickle cell disease. And so this new technology is the first time genetic editing has been used to treat any disease. As a result, patients who face excruciating pain and even death from sickle cell disease will now be able to better manage this life-threatening condition. For many who may have been unable to hold steady employment, spend time with friends and family, or otherwise participate in everyday life because of this illness, this is truly life-altering and is life-sustaining. This technology would be impossible without the diligent and the science-driven work of the FDA. So, Dr. Califf, what did the FDA consider when determining the new sickle cell treatment, determining that it is safe and effective?
As I believe you probably know, there were actually 2 treatments approved, one using gene editing per se, and another using a viral vector. And in both cases, human clinical trials were done taking sickle cell patients. As you well know, being a nurse, people with sickle cell disease, even though the genetic issue is essentially the same area of the human genome, the manifestation of the disease is quite different. So what was done in these trials were to take people who were having the worst outcomes, that is many attacks, painful crises, and then doing the gene effort, and then following them after and showing that those crises abated almost completely. It was quite a remarkable result, but in a small group of patients. And so there's a lot yet to learn, but it was important to give access to that treatment to those who would benefit.
Okay. Is there potential for this new treatment to be used to treat other genetic diseases?
It's very exciting, and I alluded to it in my opening comments. You know, I was around for the Human Genome Project, and people for decades said, where's the beef? You know, we put all this money into 3.2 billion base pairs and knowing what they are. Now we're here because thanks to the science, we can go in with molecular scissors and snip out the gene that's causing the problem and put in a new one, or snip out the gene that's causing the problem if we don't need to put in a new one. There are 10,000 rare diseases with no treatment right now. You're talking about parents of children who have terrible outcomes. And so this is such a revolution in terms of therapeutics that we're making major changes within the FDA. But it's got to go further than that because you're aware that the cost of these treatments is quite high. So I think there's going to be a lot for you in Congress to work with the administration on here to figure out, you know, if you're a parent of a child with a rare disease now, there's hope that within a few years we could have an effective treatment. But if we have hundreds to thousands of effective treatments, the environment in which this is done has got to look different than it does right now. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, yes. Chairman, okay, thank you. One last question. How can we ensure that people who require these genetic therapies aren't priced out? Because like you started to allude to.
Well, I can take the easy out and say it's not, it's not, as FDA commissioner on a hearing about FDA, it's definitely not in our remit, but I can assure you there are many discussions going on across HHS where, as you know, for example, in sickle cell disease, the majority of patients are on Medicaid.
Right.
Because their medical costs are so high and the difficulty with jobs in a case where you're sick a lot, that we've got to come up with new pricing schemes. And I am, as an academic, a health policy person, but I shouldn't opine on that here at this hearing. I'd be glad to talk with you separately.
Okay, I'll reach out. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair,
Gentlelady from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to start by offering my condolences to Ms. Malinowski, who I believe was here earlier. St. Louis and I are here today seeking accountability for the gun violence epidemic in our country and for all instances of potential law enforcement misconduct. Director Dettelbach, thank you for being here today. Let me say that I support several of the ATF's recent efforts, including the Ghost Guns Rule, the Stabilizing Brace Rule, and the efforts to stop gun trafficking. But as gun violence continues to shatter families and communities, thanks in part to weak gun laws in Republican-controlled states like mine in Missouri, equitable and effective enforcement of our existing laws, it must be a top priority. There is a difference between the way the law is written and the way it is enforced, as communities like St. Louis know all too well. So taking on the gun violence epidemic requires asking hard questions about enforcement. That's why the last time you were before this committee, I asked you about the Good Old Boys Roundup. In the 1980s and 1990s, ATF agents organized shameful whites-only events, which former ATF Director John McGaugh characterized as being racist in nature, anti-Black, and having discrimination almost every year. It may seem like old history, but there are legitimate and recent concerns about racial bias in the agency's enforcement operations, specifically in its use of sting operations. For example, a USA Today investigation from 2014 found that 91% of people arrested in ATF sting operations were Black or Latino. When you were U.S. Attorney, your office prosecuted these kinds of cases. Are you aware of these concerns regarding sting operations? And if any, what steps have you taken to address?
At ATF, we are very clear that we don't look at any of those kinds of factors, and it is absolutely a necessity, Congresswoman, that law enforcement not look at these kind of factors. And I would say there were comments that were made earlier that I thought somebody was perhaps implying that because somebody's wealthy or lives in a nice neighborhood, that they should be treated differently than other people. And I know there are lots of people who are in communities where they economically struggle, who are law-abiding citizens. We don't assume that because of where you live or how much you make, that you're any more or less likely to be a law-abiding citizen. That is a core value at ATF, and it's very important for you to ask that question and very important for me to answer it.
Thank you. And I will say that sometimes looking at it, we get to what you just said, though, looking at it and seeing that we do understand that folks in marginalized communities are often over-criminalized or criminalized, period, is an issue that we must also address and fight to. I think you kind of started to allude to that. And so thank you. These questions are essential because in order for the ATF to be effective today, it needs to fix the problems of yesterday, including its troubled history of racist behavior and enforcement. But my concern about enforcement does not extend only to questions of racism. There needs to be accountability for all instances of potential misconduct by ATF agents. And that's why I do support my Republican colleagues' efforts to get more information from federal and local law enforcement about the death of Brian Malinowski. I know there is evidence that Mr. Malinowski fired first on the agents, but the circumstances warrant more information about what happened that day. But I say this because my solidarity, I want to be clear, my solidarity and my pursuit of accountability are not conditional. But I will say that I have been surprised to hear my Republican colleagues expressing concern about law enforcement shooting, lack of body camera footage, and no-knock warrants. I'm surprised because I and many of my Democratic colleagues have pushed for law enforcement accountability for years, and Republicans have mocked us and fought against us at every step. I'm surprised because 2023 set another record for law enforcement killings in this country. Police have killed an average of 3 people per day. Police disproportionately kill Black people, and there have only been 9 days this year where police didn't kill someone. Yet Republicans have refused to hold hearings about any of those deaths. And my question is, where have you been? Where have you been? Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, we've been protesting for 10 years. We have been protesting, we've been shot with rubber bullets, we've had dogs unleashed, we have been hit with tear gas and rubber bullets. George Floyd, we were out there for 3 months. Mike Brown, we were out there for 400 days. Where were you? Why didn't you care then? Because they're Black? I don't understand. All of a sudden, now we want to talk. But see, the thing is this. When we took a knee, folks were mad and criticized us. When we were nonviolent, people still criticized us. But now all of a sudden it's because now the difference is it color? But I say this, my solidarity is not conditional. So I ask them for the record that their solidarity is not conditional, that they are willing to support oversight and accountability for all deaths by law enforcement officers, regardless of race, ethnicity, faith, location, or anything else, that they will vote for real policy solutions that prevent police brutality and fund programs that keep our communities safe, including gun violence. And yes, I went over because someone else went over too. I just want to hear that come from my Republican colleagues.
The time of the gentlelady.
We care about police brutality that affects every person.
Thank you. The time of the gentlelady's expired.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And you know you were up here preaching, right? That's right. Preaching and teaching. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for being here again. Thank you to all of our union leaders and advocates who organized this press conference, and to all the members who are here. You know, we have Representative Bowman. I know Rep. Ilmar should be coming, and a special shout out to my sister in service, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, for all the ways that you continue to show up for our community. We also thank Rep. Bowman and Rep. Omar for being on the committee and being the voices on the committee. I understand. I'm honored to stand alongside all of you today in support of our faculty, in support of our students, and their rights to speech and dissent on college campuses. As an activist, an organizer, and the proud daughter of a former union meat cutter, I know that the foundational message of every union is to stand with people, to fight for their dignity, and to advocate for those most marginalized. That's what we're standing for today. As I said after protests at Washington University and St. Louis were violently suppressed, and as I said again when the encampment at George Washington University in D.C. was violently cleared, behind every attempt to silence a protester is an idea that those in power don't want people to hear. That's right. That's right. It was true during the women's rights movement, where young women were arrested, jailed, and force-fed, which led to the ratification of the 19th Amendment. It was true during the movements for labor rights, which gave us the rights like sick leave and the 40-hour work week. It was true during the civil rights movement, when students led freedom rides, lunch counter sit-ins, and boycotts, which culminated in the Civil Rights Act of '64 and the Voting Rights Act of '65. It was true during the student-led movement against the Vietnam War, when organizing at universities, the movement to resist the draft, and the youth-led nationwide protests led to the end of the war, and campaigns to divest from South Africa by students led to the end of apartheid. These movements have all been successful. These movements, every single one, has been successful in advancing the cause of justice, the cause of equal rights for every single person. And this movement is no different. These movements are how justice is won. And it's true today. Our pro-peace, pro-humanity, anti-war movement seeks to end the Israeli government's genocide in Gaza and to ensure a just and lasting peace for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Our students, our faculty, our staff, all from different faiths, all from different backgrounds, have been on the front lines of this movement over the past month, and they have been met with appalling, violent, unlawful responses. They have been assaulted, some severely, like my friend Steve Tamari. They have been suspended, including Jewish faculty members. Their careers are in jeopardy because they have dared to speak out against genocide. For years, members of Congress and prominent right-wing commentators have whined and whined about cancel culture and the suppression of dissent on college campuses. Many of those same people have rushed to justify violent assaults and the blatant suppression of speech. And why? Because they never cared about free speech, never at all. And because they are invested in supporting the Israeli government's genocidal policies. So St. Louis and I will always stand on the side of justice, on the side of peace. St. Louis and I will always stand with our faculty, with our students, and with our staff who are advocating for human rights and the dignity of all people. St. Louis and I will always stand with our unions. We will not only stand against the genocide, but together, our movement, the movement that we've built, the movement where we've all stood together, we've put our hearts and minds together for the people to save lives, because we say no dropping bombs on babies and not with our taxpayer money. We say divest. Our movement will put an end to all of this. So, to the people that's listening, to our folks, our advocates, and those that are wondering, how do I get involved? We are the pressure. So keep up the pressure, every single one of you. Demand an end to this complicity and an end to the genocide now. We need you, and thank you all for being here, for standing up. All right. I'm not sure where. Okay, with John. All right, we're going to call up John Brandstetter.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Pulling me away from my position as Congresswoman. Come on. All you did was take some of the strings off. they need. And at the end of the day, whether I'm Congresswoman or not, I'm still taking care of my people. Because your side was so weak, you had to spend $19 million. When I unsee the 52-year family dynasty, we did it with $2 million because we spoke about who we are, what we plan to do, and we came from a place of integrity and character. But lying to deceit, distorting the truth costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to lie. To the people of St. Louis, to the people of the first district. We love you. When the insurrectionists came, and so this here was its own type of insurrection. All the people, but that's okay, because at this time, I'm taking all y'all with me, and whoever ready, we're gonna be ready to live. Let me give y'all some. So every time I stand on the House floor or I speak in a committee here, and you all know the first words that come out of my mouth. St. Louis and I'm gonna get to my speech. St. Louis and I rise to say thank you to all the people who showed up and support me and support this incredible team and the vision that we have for our future, a future that works for all of us. And so let me say to my Arab and Palestinian and our Muslim community, I hope that the new member of Congress that will be taking over in January, right before his trial starts. Let me say this though, because I'm not here, we need to build a community back, because what just happened helped to rip this community apart. And the thing is, I don't want to feed into that, because we have to be one St. Louis, because we have to grow. And so I just hope that he actually takes the time to learn about our Palestinian and our Arab and our Muslim community. And that he sees the beauty in what we have created that transcends our ethnic background and our religion and the way that we have been able to do that. And so I just want to put that out there to him as homework. This race, you all, was unlike anything St. Louis has ever seen. The flood of outside Republican money into this district.
vibrant and a resilient community, one that refuses to be undermined, one that won't be taken for granted. And together we will continue to rise and stand up against the far-right Republican extremism. Oh, he don't know what he's about to have to deal with, but I hope you know. I hope you got that, because the people deserve that. We'll stand as a beacon of hope and light and human rights for all people. We'll keep doing that. I will keep doing that work. This team will keep doing that. We'll continue to fight for the rights of all people, no matter the race, the faith, the background, the ethnicity, the religion, the age, the occupation, the gender identity. We'll keep fighting for you. We will keep fighting. We will stand up for what is right, no matter the cost, which we just paid the cost, but actually it's going to propel us forward. We will always fight for our unhoused communities, our elders, our children, our families, our veterans. We will keep supporting a free Palestine. Worldwide, we will always stand up for the safety, for the dignity, for the self-determination of all people. From St. Louis to Palestine and Israel to Bosnia to India and everywhere else. We will always keep it real and we will always keep the truth. And I'm going to continue to act with the dedication that you all have seen over the years. I will continue to work to bridge divides and address your concerns and build a stronger, more unified community. And so St. Louis, serving as a Congress member, has been the joy of my life. And I'm not done yet. Let me lastly say this. You all have been what has undergirded me and what has strengthened me. And I want to say this to all the little kids that have come up to me over the last week. The little black girls that see themselves in me. And all the little girls that see something in me. Let me say this to you. We did not fail. You did not fail. You keep rising. You keep going after what God has given you to go after. You keep fighting. You hold fast to who you are and what you believe. Because this is only the beginning. And to all of my youth watching, to all of this team. Yes. Again, this is only the beginning. And so I just want to give some thank yous. I want to thank my family. Of course, you all know who goes my dad. My mom and my children who are up here.
People thought she was me. To my nieces and nephew, and to my whole family, to my friends, and to the absolute love of my life. Yes. The one who holds me up so dearly. All right, Lord. All right, Lord. I couldn't do this. I wouldn't have been able to do this. And to Team Cori, the official. And to a lot of our partners, some of our partners, to all of our partners, but just to name a few, because we'll be here all night, Justice Democrats. Business owners, our Muslim community, big small business owners came out kicking hard. Thank you all so much. And so, I just want to thank all, just thank all of you. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for trusting in me. And again, this is only the beginning. And I want, while we're all still here, we're about to go. Or to ask you something, we got a few minutes. This weekend, we recognize the 10th anniversary of the killing of Michael Brown. And so,
he ain't gonna be there.
Everyone,
He ain't gonna be there.
And those watching on television, to show up, to support. Come on. Go look for the information on social media. Show up to these events. Show up for Mike Brown. Show up for letting his family. Show up. Show up. ChosenForChange.org. Northview High School, 9 a.m. Friday. And even if you sold out our community.
What's the word? Sold out. What's the word? What's the word?
Sold out.
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 Wesley Sale.
And so I am asking you all that because they want to represent all the people of this district, I'm asking that they do right by Mike Brown's family. Your congresswoman loves you so much.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Missouri for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Attorney Garland, for being here. St. Louis and I are here today in support of our democratic institutions and the rule of law. Nearly 4 years ago, I was barricaded in my office with my staff, wondering if we would be killed or at least harmed by a mob incited by Donald Trump to storm the U.S. Capitol because he could not accept the fact that he lost the 2020 presidential election. In that moment, I thought to myself, like, this has to be it. This has to be the moment in our country that people finally realize that the extremist MAGA movement is a violent cult that will destroy anything in its path, all for Donald Trump. And yet, nearly 4 years later, here we are again. Far from rejecting Donald Trump and his insurrection, the Republican Party has embraced its role as the party of insurrection. Republicans have defended January 6th, attacked the Department of Justice for seeking accountability, continued their assault on voting rights, and built a pro-insurrection wing of the Supreme Court. They have also overwhelmingly backed Trump, who has been convicted of 34 felony criminal charges, despite his attacking the prosecutor, the judge, the jurors in the case, and even though he still refuses to say he will support the outcome of the 2024 election. So as we sit here today, our democracy is in as precarious a position as it was in 2020, if not more. Attorney General Garland, I want to thank you, but I want to talk to you about the ongoing assault on our democracy and the rule of law. How does interference by politicians in criminal trials harm our democracy and the separation of powers?
Our criminal justice system proceeds on the understanding that the decisions will be made in the courtroom without political interference in any way. And fundamentally, it depends on the respect of the citizenry of the judicial processes that occur. People can disagree with results, people can challenge results, people can appeal results, but we respect the judicial process, the judges, and the juries, and the appellate justices. That's a fundamental element of our democracy.
And how do conspiracy theories and misinformation affect the ability of courts to conduct impartial trials?
Well, that's a broader question than I can answer in specifics. I think attacks on, personal attacks on judges, personal attacks on juries, personal attacks on prosecutors and agents make people afraid to do their job according to the merits and according to the law.
Thank you. I will say an obvious answer is that Republicans are not doing any of this because they care about our communities, they care about our country, or our democracy. They are doing this because they realize their agenda is absolutely unpopular and they will do anything to stay in power. The Republican Party is all about projection. Republicans talk about violent crime while inciting violent crime on January 6th. Republicans talk about the weaponization of the federal government as they themselves weaponize it on behalf of Donald Trump, including the baseless impeachment investigation and these sham committee hearings. Republicans talk about the unfairness of the criminal legal system while ignoring the actual communities, mostly black and brown, who are disproportionately targeted by that system and don't have high-powered attorneys, unlike Donald Trump, who has used his wealth, his resources, his power to shield himself from accountability his entire life. Republicans talk about big government and liberty and don't tread on me as they use government to rip away the freedoms of women, of LGBTQ plus folks, and countless others. Republicans talk about cancel culture as they champion violent crackdowns on students who dare to speak out about the humanity of Palestinians. Republicans talk about unethical judicial overreach despite the comical corruption of their extremist justices. So while Republicans focus on hypocrisy and distraction, my Democratic colleagues and I will continue asking the real questions, advancing real solutions, and advocating for our communities. So thank you again for being here, Attorney General Garland, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from Indiana.